At first, we see our main hero named Yajiri, who's currently on a school trip riding a bus, but he fell asleep. While sleeping, Yajiri dreams about his past, where we see a younger version of him walking through the hallway of a secret underground facility where he grew up as a stinky lab rat, just like the one in Stranger Things. We see bullets flying in all directions, but our hero is like Neo from The Matrix, and doesn't pay any attention to these bullets and starts calling for his caretaker, whom he calls Mother. She's known as Miss Saka, and Yajiri is very angry now because someone has taken his mother hostage and is pointing a gun at her. At this moment, his mother gets worried and asks Yajiri to stay back, and she tells the boy she's sorry. At this moment, the person holding the gun starts mocking Yajiri and tells him that he's nothing but a worthless little orphan who has nothing left now. And before the criminal pulls the trigger, Yajiri suddenly looks at the perpetrator's face and uses a special instant kill ability that eliminates the criminal's life without Yajiri even touching him at all. This shocks his mother, Miss Saka. Then the scene switches and we return to the bus trip. And here a girl named Tomasha is screaming at Yajiri, asking him to wake up because the bus they're on is currently being transported to a strange world. But Yajiri still can't wake up. Moments later, Yajiri finally wakes up and asks Tomasha what happened while he was asleep, and she screams at him again, asking Yajiri how he was sleeping through one of the most tragic events in human history. After that, Yajiri realizes he's in a different world, where something crazy that looks like a dragon is attacking their school bus, and the legendary creature has already killed many students. Tomasha tells him that the dragon is incredibly powerful and was killing students one after another. After that, Yajiri looks for anything he can scare the creature with, so he picks up a random microphone and throws it at the creature. But obviously it didn't do anything to the dragon. Instead, it made the dragon really mad at Yajiri, and it was about to end their lives in seconds, as it charges a fireball in its mouth, while Tomasha clings to Yajiri, fearing for her life. But just as it was about to blow them up, Yajiri simply looks at the dragon straight in its eye, and within a second, the giant creature drops to the ground and gets eliminated from its own world by this skinny, Stranger Things kid from Japan. And after telling Tomasha that she owes him for saving her life, Tomasha tells Yajiri that if he doesn't put his Game Boy aside, she'll never leave him alone. So he put it aside, and she started explaining what happened to their school trip. And here, Tomasha tells Yajiri that while the bus was heading through a tunnel, as soon as they came out the other end, the entire scene changed, and they arrived at a beautiful meadow, and a random, rude, and extremely arrogant fairy named Sean appeared on the bus and welcomed them all to her world, which angers the school principal, and as soon as he smelled Sean's hand, he disappeared into thin air. She warns everyone on the bus that her hand will make any one of them disappear as if she's holding Thanos' glove, and that if they don't listen, she'll make someone else smell her hand and see if they can handle her smell. After that, she starts bullying the entire class on the bus, and told them all that she's an SSS rank witch, and the most powerful queen on the island, and that her power level is over 9,000, just as a pop culture reference joke. But no one laughed, which annoyed Queen Jin, and she told them it would be wise to laugh at her jokes from now on, or they won't last long in this world. After calling them all a bunch of disgusting wizards who don't possess any kind of magical power, and that after getting beaten up, existing in her world without possessing magic is forbidden, because the whole purpose of this strange world is to level up and face each student and test them, and overcome the strongest creatures with their magic, to see who will become worthy of being her successor. At that moment, she made everyone on the bus glow, along with a 3D stats screen, and here she simply tells them that the games will start shortly, because their first test is to defeat the powerful dragon that no one has been able to defeat before. But Tomasha complains to the queen, saying she doesn't even have a stats screen and isn't glowing like the rest of the students. Tomasha notices how a few others aren't glowing either, like the arrogant popular girl Shinzaki, and a boy named Ko, and also Yajiri, who was fast asleep during the entire transfer event and knows nothing about the fact that he was transported to a completely new world. One of the girls tells the entire class that the dragon is approaching shortly, and the dragon appears to be over level 100, making it 100 times stronger than any of these students, so they get scared and ask the queen to return them to Japan. However, the annoying school jock in the class named Yakim, who thinks he's the Justin Timberlake of Japan, steps forward to the class and tells them they have no choice but to eliminate the dragon and complete their first test to become a first-class wizard, which is all he wants, especially since Izaki has granted the class's ordinary students powerful first-level power and abilities. After his speech, all the gifted individuals get off the bus to wait to meet the dragon and eventually kill the beast, to complete the first parallel world test. However, General Izaki tells the 4 weird people who weren't blessed with any magic to stay on the bus, because they can't help defeat anything in this world, and closes the bus door, and all the other gifted students head to the forest and wait for the dragon to arrive. At this moment, the dragon appears. But as we know, Yajiri uses his crazy skill that basically allows him to be One Punch Man, anything using just his eyes, making him more powerful than Saitama himself. After seeing the beast fall to the ground, Tamasha asks Yajiri if he was the one who killed the dragon this way without even touching it, but he denies it and said he had nothing to do with it, and tells Tamasha that he doesn't even have any magical power because he's a lonely loser geek. So how could a man like him defeat the dragon boss? Suddenly she remembers how Yajiri is the lazy student who sleeps all day. So what he's saying must be true. When they get off the bus, they notice something flying in the air above, and it turns out they're their classmates who came back to see if the dragon had killed the students who don't have magic. But to their surprise, the dragon was already dead, and they spotted the arrogant and annoying Tamasha and the lazy Yajiri below. After landing on the ground, they told Yajiri and Tamasha about their amazing magical skills in the parallel world, and each of these boys has a specific role to play. The fat chubby guy named Damon is a healer, and Higashida is a powerful fire-glowing hero, and Yusaki is a necromancer. Damon is angry that Tamasha is alive because he can't harass her and turn her into a zombie using his healing magic, and in conjunction with the necromancer, he could bring her back from the dead. But here the man explains how he only came back to use the necromancer's ability on Tamasha to slap her cheeks after bringing her back from the dead because she would never allow him to touch her in class or get close to him, so maybe her zombie version will allow him. But here Tamasha tells the man to go and describes him as the ugliest person in the class, so he shows off how powerful he is compared to her and displays his crazy fireball ability and threatens Tamasha and demands that she let him smell her feet or else he'll eliminate them both. But at that moment, Yagiri tells the stupid boy that he's weaker than he thinks and points his finger at him, ordering him to drop dead. They all start laughing, thinking Yagiri is just trying to mess with them. But after a few seconds, the hotshot hero immediately drops dead and is eliminated by Yagiri without even being touched, shocking the other two idiots. His mage friend starts crying over his loss, so he asks the fat healer to heal the hero, but Yagiri points his finger at the mage, and he gets erased just like the hero. The only one left is the chubby healer who tries to heal his two friends. But resurrection or healing magic doesn't work on people targeted by Yagiri either because of his power. After the fat guy tells Yagiri how unfair his power is, and that it might be the strongest thing in the entire world since Yagiri can simply kill anything he wants with one strike, Yagiri tells the arrogant little dwarf that there's actually one thing in this world that can counter his instant kill ability, but it definitely won't be him. At that point, he finally gives up and tries to befriend Yagiri, approaching him with friendly intentions, but Yagiri knows when someone intends to kill him, and explains how his other power is a special sense to know when someone wants to attack him. This makes the healer boy fall to the ground and beg the demon lord of this world to erase Yagiri because he's simply too strong for anyone to face. After Yagiri asks that little fanatic why he's so excited about this and what the Demon Lord even is, the healer tells Yagiri that this isn't the first time he's been incarnated in this world, and explains how not long ago, he and two other friends were summoned here to a man's kingdom to defeat the Demon King, but they failed, so they were sent here again. But Yagiri has already wiped out his entire crew, so they're all doomed. However, Yagiri doesn't believe him because he's never seen him, or the others miss any school days. But the healer tells him that's because in the magical world, it seems like they were here for several months, but while they were traveling back to Earth in the real world in Japan, it was only a few hours gone, so it seems like he's lying. Nevertheless, Yagiri prepares to end this boy's entire career, but then the boy promises he'll be his loyal servant and guide him through this other world and help him find the Demon Lord. After that, he tells Tamasha they'll need to track down this Demon King and finish it so he can return to their world, and finally relax in peace and quiet with video games and anime summaries with hot Cheetos. However, Tamasha is surprised that Yagiri is helping her, and tells the girl he's only protecting her because he remembers the soft feel of her chest when she tried to wake him on the bus, which makes her extremely angry because she thought he was just a nice guy with no other intentions. However, Yagiri likes all of us, and he's definitely a man of culture. On the other hand, we see Sagan tossing in her bed while waiting for her escort Yuichi to arrive and report to her. He explains that 4 people died in the first Sage test, including 2 unblessed people and 2 people with S-rank abilities. This shocks Shin for a moment, but she decides to procrastinate like you procrastinate on your assignments and says it should be something worth worrying about before lying down again. After that, Yagiri and Tamasha decide to go to the nearby town to see if they can meet their classmates. They arrive just before the city gates close and manage to get in, even though they don't know the language of this world. Soon, a senior officer approaches them, and it turns out he can speak their language. Yagiri explains they got separated from their group and are now looking to meet up with them. The arrogant officer says he's been ordered not to interfere with the Sage candidates, but there's nothing stopping him from helping them either. He says their classmates have already moved on to their next destination, and that's all he's willing to offer them. But he looks at Tamasha and says she alone can stay at his place all night if she wants. But Tamasha immediately grabs Yugi's hand and runs away from there, saying no thank you. Yagiri asks her what's wrong with her, and she says she was worried he'd send him to the underworld because of his rude behavior. Yagiri asks her to stop acting like he's some kind of crazy killer, but she says she's surprised he doesn't know he's exactly that. Nevertheless, They start looking around at the structures and people of this fantasy world until they run into a cute cat girl named Mio who offers to help for free. They ask her why she's doing this, and she explains her goal is to date a sage candidate, which is why she's trying to befriend as many male candidates from the sage exam as possible. She says she's heard they're susceptible to singing for cat girls like her, and are usually really strong and rich too, so she's counting on her race and cute face. They decide to go along with it while she shows them around, and Tomichika ends up buying a bunch of clothes too. But by nighttime, it ends up exactly as Yagiri expected when they discover the cat girl is actually part of a gang of thieves who surround them and plan to sell them as stress relief slaves. After confirming they're up to no good, Yagiri starts the massacre by telling everyone standing behind him to die, then starts picking off those in front of him one by testing his ability on them. He tests whether he can cause only certain parts of their bodies to die instead of completely eliminating them, and keeps doing that until only the cat girl and the bandit leader remain. After that, he tests some delayed functions by telling them to die and letting them run for a bit before the ability kicks in, and both are sent to the underworld too. After taking care of them, they both decided to sneak out, but the knights in the area stopped them. Their leader Edelgard asks them what happened there and reveals they saw the men around them collapsing to the ground out of nowhere. Yagiri asks them why they didn't help if they were watching them, and she reveals she was planning to follow them once they were captured, track those bastards to their base, and arrest their leader. She also tells them not to act proud because they're blessed with the saint's protection, which makes them immune to attacks from their side. Then her vice commander speaks up and says according to his assessment skill, these two don't carry any blessings from the saint. Upon hearing that, the commander says it would be hard to believe they're responsible for those people's collapse and lets them go. The vice commander apologizes for causing them trouble and shows them a fancy hotel to stay in all night to show his gratitude for their tolerance. And at the hotel, Yagiri books 2 separate rooms for them, and as soon as Cha enters the room, she wonders if Yagiri is romantically interested in her. Then she feels a cold breeze and looks up to find a fat ghost floating in the air. At first, this shocks Tomacha, but then she takes a closer look at the ghost's face and wonders if it's her older sister. But the ghost speaks and says she's called Makoko, wife of the son of the founders of the Dana school and a distant ancestor of Tomacha. She also adds that she's her guardian spirit and is tasked with the duty of restoring the Dana school lineage. Tomacha asks why she didn't show herself earlier, and Makoko replies she was scared of Yagiri because she might have been eliminated if he got startled and decided to get rid of her by accident. Then she asks Tomacha to explain her existence to Yagiri the next day so she can show herself without worry. Then she tells her she'll protect her from supernatural threats and that she's the one who protected her from getting that blessing from the saint too, because once you accept that, you become a puppet in her hand. She also adds that her wish is for Tomacha to return to her real world, and to achieve that, she'll pass on her family's secret techniques and abilities so she can fight for herself too. The next morning, Tomacha walks and meets Yogiri and asks him if they're going to chase after their classmates right away. At this exact moment, the concierge approaches them and introduces herself as Celestina. It turns out this hotel is a first-class establishment for the wealthy, taking care of anything and everything they ask of them as long as they can pay for it. Yogiri asks her for help locating their classmates, and she gives them a map of the royal capital and 2 tickets for a train heading there. She says according to their information network, their classmates are making their way to the capital through the forest while killing local monsters to level up. Yogiri also gives all their gold and valuables to invest in some form of high-yield accounts, and she prepares some items including a charger for Yogiri's Nintendo Switch and translations to help them on their journey too. After that, they board the train and head to the capital, and on their way, Tomacha also tells Yogiri about Makoko and they relax. Tomacha ends up sitting next to Yogiri while his charger is running as she wonders about their classmates. Suddenly, Yogiri grabs her and they hide as a powerful slashing attack cuts the ceiling above their heads in one strike, and a train employee asks everyone to calm down and head to a safe place as they see a mechanical alien called the Aggressor invading their world and fighting a sage named Sano. Their battle seems like it's from another world where they exchange mountain-leveling attacks on each other. Tomasha asks Yogiri whether he'll take out both of them since they got in his way, but he says that's not a reason to kill someone. He says he needs to set a clear standard so he doesn't end up killing innocent people over small things like bothering him and stuff like that because it's unfair. Soon, the battle between the sage and the Aggressor takes both of them near Yogiri, and the sage, being arrogant and full of himself, kills a bunch of trained passengers behind them, saying they're just collateral damage from their battle, and that Yogiri and Tomasha should bow their heads before his great sage self. This pisses off Yogiri enough to shut off the sage's life switch, and seeing this makes the Aggressor genuinely scared of him. He completely surrenders before the protagonist and offers to help in any way possible. Yogiri asks him about ways to return to his original world, and the robot says he only knows how to get back to his own world and can't take him there because it's too dangerous on one hand, and secondly, he didn't bring his real body here, so he can't really take stuff from this world with him anyway. Plus, he tells Yogiri that if he has enough mana and the right coordinates, he can definitely return to his real world. Yogiri says everything's fine and asks him to guide him once he gets the mana and coordinates, and the robot happily agrees to make the most of it. Makoko also requests a shape-shifting weapon from the robot to help Tamasha in her battles. On the other hand, we see the knights in the city taking one of the thugs who lost his sight after Yogiri killed him to an immortal vampire sage named Lin. She tries to heal the eye by rebuilding it from scratch, but it doesn't regain its function. She also tries to turn the thug into her follower by biting his neck. But that doesn't work either. But then someone bursts into their room, and it turns out he's a hero who's supposed to fight monsters and aggressors. The hero says he needs to put an end to the sage's tyranny, and uses his special attack called Airplane and 2 towers to blow up the entire place. But it doesn't do any damage to the vampire sage, because she says if it was that easy to end her life, things would be way better. Then she says she's too bored to deal with him, and simply throws him out of her tower without killing him. After that, she asks the knights to track down Yogiri and find his location, then heads to meet Sage Shin, and talks to her about this guy with instant death ability. Shin says she'd prefer Lin not interfere with the sage candidacy tests, but if she takes care of the disaster called Darkness for her, she'll allow it. Lin agrees, and asks her follower army commander called the Immortal Core Masayuki to go to Hanabusa City, because she might need them there. Meanwhile, we see Eri and Tachiki making their way to the nearest city from their train wreck, which happens to be Hanabusa too. It looks like a super modern city with tall skyscrapers and buildings that look like modern Japan. While walking, Makoko notices that instead of the city being protected by physical walls, it's surrounded by a protective barrier that keeps monsters from entering. They soon reach the first-class hotel that Celestina recommended to them, and after entering, they coincidentally run into one of their classmates named Yuki, who's now wearing some fancy clothes. Tamasha asks him what he was doing there since the others should still be in the forest working on their levels, but he says he's moving separately from them because he has a more efficient and superior way of leveling up. Then he introduces his harem of personal guards consisting of 5 women he picked from his sea of girlfriends. Yogiri wonders what he was doing, and Tamasha explains that he was always popular with girls because of his good looks, but it seems like there's something more to it. At this very moment, Yuki turns to her and asks if she'd like to be his mistress, which makes her so dry that the Sahara Desert is jealous of her. And she asks him what makes him so confident, and he explains that he's been blessed with one of the most powerful classes in this world known as the Dominator, which allows him to turn weak opponents into his servants. It turns out when Yuki and his other classmates were together grinding in the forest, everyone tried to avoid him because of his class, but then Ardo approached him and revealed he's an advisory class. He tells him about the hidden details of his Dominator skill and suggests a plan he figured out after watching the anime The Shield Hero. He tells him to buy weak-level servants, then make them fight on his behalf to gain experience for leveling up. This pyramid scheme resonated with his leveling idea and his desire to have his own harem, and led to this situation. After hearing this, Tamasha rejects him and says she'll stay with Yogiri, and they both walk away. Meanwhile, we see the vampire sage Ling battling the aggressor called Darkness. Yogiri decides to get some rest and ends up sleeping for 3 days straight, while Tamasha waits for him in her room the whole time. While doing so, Makoko tells her about someone watching her with hostile intent, and she decides to wake up Yogiri and asks him to come to her room. Yogiri comes out and uses his hostile detection hack, then shoots Yuki's weakest personal guard Erika with instant death ability. After that, he enters Tomi's room and tells the hotel reception that a woman collapsed in the lobby on his floor. At the same time, we also see Lion's immortal core wreaking havoc in the city streets and riding over civilians and turning them into zombies, making them part of her army. Meanwhile, Yuki notices that Erika's signal has disappeared and wonders what happened to her, and sends 2 of his personal guards to secure Tamasha while clearing a deep 150-floor dungeon by converting defeated monsters into his servants. On the other hand, Yogiri and Tamasha decide to leave the hotel to avoid any fight with Yuki, but they're ambushed by his personal guard leader Riza, an ice sorceress. She says she's there to get Tamasha and freezes them both in solid ice, but Yogiri kills the ice with his ability and makes it super easy to shatter. This shocks Riza, and she tries to cast another spell, but Yogiri kills the spell and then kills her staff too, making her drop to her knees. After defeating her, Yogiri asks her if she can use magic without her staff and if she's carrying any other staffs. She says she's a staff mistress and can only use magic through staffs, and that she's carrying 1 small backup in her treasure boxes. She also tells them about Yuki's orders to capture Tamasha, and at this moment they're attacked by a doll crawling on the wall. But Tamasha puts her down using her martial arts skills that manifest because of Makamoko's effect. It turns out they're dolls belonging to Chelsea, Yuki's other guard, and Yogiri gets rid of most of them with his ability too. At this moment, Riza tries to surprise them using a small one disguised as a hairpin, but Yogiri puts her down with his ability too. After that, they get Chelsea to stop fighting too, and surrender all the information she has about Yuki and his plan. Seeing Riza and Chelsea defeated, Yuki decides to lure them using a fleet of cockroaches. He controls using the Dominator class ability and makes them attack the couple, but Yogiri uses his Wi-Fi monitoring hack to pinpoint his location and puts him in the dungeon. On the other hand, we see Yuki's remaining personal guards Euphemia and Stephanie. While Stephanie wonders what she should do after being freed from his contract, she decides to stay by his side and cries for a while Euphemia makes her way out of the dungeon and wonders why there's so much light coming from the entrance. After getting out, she finds herself in a desert, then turns around to see darkness devouring the city and leaving nothing but sand in its wake. She also finds Lin flying in the sky, who says her attacks are useless against the shapeless darkness, and there's nothing she can do now to stop it. She flies down and casts a magic spell on her, and turns her into her servant, and makes her tell her everything she knows. Meanwhile, Yogiri and Tomasha make their way out of the hotel, and wonder what's happening outside as everyone around them has turned into zombies and someone on a loudspeaker is yelling that the zombie party is about to start. They both decide to flee the city, while Leon tells Euphemia that she wants to know if Yeri can kill her with his ability or not. At the same time, we see the leader of the Immortals Company talking to the city mayor named Ryuta, who turns out to be Leon's servant as well. Masayuki asks Ryota to hand over Kaz of the city. It's an order from the sage Leon, then uses the public loudspeakers to tell the living in the city that he's looking for these two people, displaying pictures of Yugiri and Tom on all the screens in the city. He tells them that if they want to live and not turn into zombies, they should move quickly because he also sealed the city with a barrier using the key. This makes Raya really angry because he worked hard to make this city prosper, but he can't do anything against Leon's orders now. With everyone coming after Tasha's bat for the ketones, Yugiri decides to head to the town square to make a deal with Masayuki himself. Once he gets there, he tells him to lower the barrier because they want to board a train and go to the royal capital, but Masuki asks them if they even know what kind of situation they're in, while raising his army of undead soldiers. He says that those who are already dead can't be killed, but Yugiri simply wants them to die too using his Opus ability. This really shocks Masayuki, and he asks how that's possible, and Yugiri explains in the most awesome way that he's the one who decides whether something is dead or not. Hearing this, Masayuki gets angry and says there's no way such a ridiculous ability exists in this world, as he starts transforming into his vampire werewolf mode, but Yugiri simply puts him down mid-transformation monologue saying he doesn't need to wait for the most disgusting anime fool to finish his crappy transformations. Then he turns to Ryuta and asks him if he can bring the barrier back up, and asks him why everyone is after them. He explains that they were in the lands controlled by the Sage Leon, and doesn't know why she's interfering with the Sage Shin's candidacy test. At this moment, they notice the city people walking toward them, as if possessed by something. Makoko says it seems they're being controlled using some kind of spiritual link, and Ruta says if that's the case, he should be able to protect them using the city's barrier, but to his horror the barrier doesn't work, and it seems Leon is interfering with it herself. With this, the civilians start attacking Yugiri, and they begin falling around him like dead moths, as his ability automatically sends them to the underworld. Yugiri notices how seeing them die is really hard on the mayor, and tells him to get close to him unless he wants to get hurt by them. He says he feels like someone is trying to test the extent of his abilities, and how something similar happened to him in the past. At the same time, we see Leon looking at the city from afar along with her newly acquired maid. As darkness approaches where Yugiri is, she creates a copy of herself without Yugi's memories, and tells her to rise into the sky, multiply, then attack the city if they see anything unusual happening, like the darkness being attacked or suddenly disappearing. She says that since these copies have no memory of Yugiri, their attacks shouldn't generate any kind of hostility toward him, and even if he finds them using his observation hack like he found Yuki, he shouldn't be able to hurt her real body, because it's different from the clones. On the other hand, we see Yugiri, and the others notice the darkness approaching them, turning everything it touches to sand. Everyone wonders how to deal with it, but Yugiri says he'll simply kill it using his ability, and makes the darkness disappear into thin air. But suddenly red meteor-like attacks start raining from the sky and destroying the city. Tomacha uses her sharp vision and says they look like a red-haired lady wearing a red dress, and Ryota confirms it's the Sage Leon and wonders why she's doing this, losing all his respect for her. They wonder how to deal with this attack now, as Yugiri says they're too fast for him to see to use his ability, and they also don't have any hostility he can track. Only if they could make her aim directly at him, he'd be able to attack her back with his ability, and Ryota suggests they head to the open park area that's most likely to be hit by the next attack, according to the data he was analyzing thanks to the bird's eye view skill he got from being mayor. He then teleports them to the park, using his authority as city mayor, and disappears moments before Leon's copy attacks them. Tomacha manages to spot her in time for Yugiri to locate her and eliminate her using his ability. Tasha also defends them against the blast, using Makam Muko's powers and the shape-shifting material they got from the giant attacking robot. On the other hand, We see Leon talking to Yu as she reveals that all her blood was defeated using Yugiri's ability. She says she now just needs to create dolls with different memories, so he can't target them all at once. But to her surprise, her real body was killed at her home, leading to her complete demise. But before falling, she's relieved because it'll be her way of getting a new life, using one of her experimental bodies she created biologically without any memories. At this moment, we see a young girl with pink hair waking up in a coffin somewhere in the palace, picking up a display stone containing Leon's last recorded message. The message tells her who she is, and how she wants her to live her life, and how she doesn't have any of her memories to prevent being affected by Yui's ability. Back in the city, we see Eri and Tamacha returning to Ryota, revealing they defeated the sage and asking him if it bothers him at all. Ri says he has no respect for someone who harmed his precious civilians and gives them a military-grade vehicle to travel to the royal capital. In the car, Tamacha asks Yugiri if he should be the one driving, but he says he always ends up crashing the car while playing racing games, making Tamacha take over the driving herself. Makoko says she should be able to drive and operate all kinds of vehicles and weapons thanks to her innate talent as heir to the Dana school, which makes no sense to her, but she simply goes along with it. While all this is happening, we see a small glimpse of what the other wise candidates are doing in the forest. The samurai class candidate named Raku finishes killing beasts for the day, and returns to her camp where she finds the American Ninja class student Carol holding her phone in her hands. She asks her what she was doing in her camp with her phone, and she explains that she found it missing in the forest and was here to return it. She also reveals she took it upon herself to look at their orders, to find out what they were using to track Yugiri. It turns out they're both government spies from Japan and America respectively, who joined Yugi's class to monitor him. The Americans were using a satellite to monitor him in the real world, but it's useless in this world, which is why Carol was looking at what the Japanese are using since they're the ones who have his physical custody. Ralu opens her order, and to her horror and alert, it shows that the first gate of Alpha Omega is opening on the other side of the map. We see Tamacha driving the car like a panicked duck, making life-saving turns around the crazy mountain road to reach the capital. She eventually encounters a giant rock in her way, and decides to stop while looking at Yugiri, who is somehow sleeping even with all her screaming during this crazy trip. At this moment, we see what Yugiri was dreaming about as we dive into flashback memories from his childhood when this office lady first met him and gave him his name Yugiri and taught him how to shake hands with others. This lady is called Saka Takato, and we see her signing an agreement form while interviewing for a special job. The agreement says she won't complain even if she dies during her tenure. At first, she decides to walk away, instead of signing her soul over, but the interviewer Yoku manages to convince her by telling her she'll get retirement benefits if she agrees to it. After signing the agreement, she asks if there's some kind of super-secret villain, organization or something, but the scientists say they're a respectable society conducting special human experiments to improve their society. Then he tells her that her job is to babysit a monster. She asks him what it looked like, but Yoku says he hasn't seen it himself, and all he knows is that it can kill anyone just by thinking. Its codename is Alpha Omega, and they believe that by providing it with modern education and basic humanity, they might be able to prevent it from wiping out all forms of life from the planet. He tells her she has a teacher's license, so she's the right person for this mission. Then he takes her to an underground room and tells her she can't cross this line, and that everything she might want to know regarding this job is written in this manual. After getting everything she needs, she enters the room and opens the huge vault gate with her keycard and discovers she's in some kind of artificially created facility with a natural-looking sky and landscape in the background too. She looks at the manual to find the house where this monster is supposed to be living, and after entering, she finds only a small child sitting in the living room. This makes her really angry, and she says it's ridiculous to lock up a child in a place like this. She takes him and tells him to play with the tadpoles or something, but the child notices a shadow demon behind her and kills it using his powers. He tells her that these things sometimes come to attack him, but there's no need to worry about them. Besides, it's about to get dark, so if it's okay with her, he'd like to play tomorrow instead of now. Hearing all this calms, aka down, and she shakes his hand and introduces herself by name. She asks him his name, and he says they call him Alpha Omega here, and before he came here, they used to call him Lord Akashi. At this moment, they hear their stomachs growling, and they decide to go in and eat something. Suka realizes she'll have to cook too, but being as good a cook as a stupid sandwich, she ends up making some instant ramen while the child takes a bath. During their meal, she asks him what name his mother used to call him, but he doesn't know what that is, so she ends up naming him herself and gives him the name Yugiri Takato, which makes him really happy. Then she teaches him how to introduce himself with a handshake and say, "Nice to meet you." At this moment, we see Eri waking up to Tamasha, who tells him they've reached a dead end. They both decide to take another route and back up, but the car hits a small dragon on their way back. Both get out of the car, and Yugiri takes care of the beast, before a fleet of dragons comes out of nowhere and starts flying toward them too. Yer shoots them all down too, And after that, they meet the golden lightning dragon who says they passed and starts flying away. But Yugiri stops him and asks him to come back and tell them what he meant by that, or else he'll do some pest control on him too. The dragon returns and transforms into a small child and explains that she was testing them to see if they were worthy of seeking the Swordmaster. They ask her who this Swordmaster is, which surprises her because she thought they were there to take the Swordmaster's test. They tell her they were on their way to the royal capital and got lost. So she introduces herself as Attila and offers to help them if they agree to go see the Swordmaster with her. After they agree, she takes them to a mystical forest where the Swordmaster gathers all the test applicants. There they meet an old man named Uar, who announces that if half of them don't remain within 10 minutes, they'll all fail, which marks the beginning of a massive battle royale. The first to get cut down is this unfortunate loser, followed by a group of others, including a suspicious group of mages whom Yajiri sends with his ability. They both also get defended by a righteous knight named Rick, and he manages to save the loser Beta, who was cut in half, named Looney, thanks to a special stone called an Apology Stone that gives him random powers and rewards. After that, they all head to the next test destination, and Lionel also explains that he got these stones from to compensate for the bad luck he suffers from. He says he gets new stones every night, and these stones can be used to summon random items and effects through the gacha system. As they approach their next destination, the miasma in the area starts getting more toxic and even makes Looney throw up on the ground, but Makoko suddenly notices that the miasma has disappeared and wonders what caused it, while we see Yajiri acting strangely. After that, they head to the tower, where shows them a giant seal spell with the Dark King sealed inside it, along with the old Swordmaster, who inserted her sword through both of them while sealing them. In this seal where time flows very slowly, Urban explains that it's their duty as Swordmaster to defeat the Dark King once he's released. But then a witch girl reveals herself and throws a huge fireball at the Dark King, saying she'll defeat him once and for all. But the spell simply becomes stagnant in the time seal, and she realizes how stupid she is. Rick tells Yojiri that the witch is called Frederica, and she's his friend who told him to take the Swordmaster test in the first place. After that, the examiners tell everyone they need to reach the bottom floor of the tower, while defeating monsters and completing various tasks to earn points. They need to earn 100 points during the next 24 hours, and also reach the bottom of the tower to pass the test. Meanwhile, Tomasha looks at the Dark King and asks Yojiri if he can kill him or not, and Giri tells her something that really shocks her after listening to him. They both decide to rush down the tower and join Rick and Lionel and make their way down. Thanks to everyone who went before them, they can pass without worrying about many monsters and traps, but Lionel still manages to kill himself from an arrow trap. His apology stones help him through it all as usual. They even run into one of the king's knights called Teresa, who was supposed to be a follower of URA, but turned rogue after killing too many people during the test, and is now on a rampage. Rick fights against her for a while, and it looks like they'll show us an epic battle, but Yajiri puts an end to all this, using his ability, and tells everyone to hurry. After that, they reach floor 998, which turns out to be a safe zone, with lots of rooms for participants to relax in as well. They all decide to go their own ways from here. Rick decides to move forward, and Lionel decides to rest until midnight to get new stones, while Tomasha and Yojiri decide to take a good nap. At midnight, Lionel gets a special anniversary event pulled from his gacha system, and manages to summon the who summoned him to this world, and gave him the apology stones. She says she's only there to check on him, then takes her leave, while Yojiri and Tomasha simply sleep in the same bed. The next morning when they wake up, they see Makoko half stuck in the wall, and she says something is making all the spirits in the tower get sucked upward. Yojiri helps her by killing the suction mechanism, then tells Tomasha to prepare herself because from this point forward he'll kill everyone without discrimination because they're in a dangerous place. She says it's okay, and that she's already steeled her nerves and isn't hypocritical enough to blame him while he's doing it to save her. Hearing this makes Yojiri really happy in his heart, and he becomes shy and red, and says he's hungry and requests room service for their meal. On the other hand, we see a sage named AI fighting against another summoned sage named Rudo, who abandoned his duties as a sage after coming to this world and established a community of Pekin in the forest and decided to live there peacefully. AI's job is to assassinate sages and sage candidates who abandon their duties, and she possesses a power called the Fair World that allows her to manipulate the powers granted to herself and others by Lord to the maximum degree. She kills Rudo, and her dagger tells her that her next targets are the sage candidates, Yojiri and Tomasha, and tells her to head toward them. On her way, she ends up being chased by a fatty, who turns out to be none other than Damon, who's been wandering the forest since the first episode following Yojiri's orders. It seems he somehow got rid of his connected servant, and reveals he was received by Rudo. But now that he's dead, he wants to follow AI and begs her to let him become her slave. With that, they both head toward Yogi's location and encounter the gold or dragon from before. Damon worries that AI won't be able to defeat the dragon because her ability only allows her to deal with cheat skills received by people coming from another world, but she says she can interfere with any natural phenomenon and make it as she thinks. But this doesn't work if her target has enough Lux D. Then she makes the dragon unable to fly because it's too big, and before she can do anything else, an attacker named Hedgehog immediately appears and kills the dragon with his sharp leg, after which he disappears again into the distance, while the path to the Swordmaster's tower appears for AI. Meanwhile, Yojiri and Tacha make their way through almost half the tower until they encounter a silver-haired man who accuses them of cheating. The man introduces himself as Glacio, the creator of the tower, and tells Yuri that he feels sad because he was bypassing all his traps by killing them using his ability. He says he's too dangerous to be left alone. He starts preparing some big spells while saying he'll give them a choice, but Yojiri eats him into the other world saying he's in a hurry. After that, they go to the next area where they find another Dominator using his harem of girls to fight another test contestant who turns out to be half-demon like Euphemia. Yojiri asks permission to pass because he's not interested in fighting, but the Dominator says he'll let them pass if they defeat his guards in a 3-on-3 battle. Yojiri agrees and eliminates them all with his ability and starts walking forward, but this makes the Dominator really angry, and he tries to stand to cast a spell, but Yojiri puts him down just as quickly, calling him a liar. Seeing all this, the half-demon girl says she has a request to make of them, and they decide to at least listen to her. The girl introduces herself as Thea, and explains that she's looking for her little sister. She says she came here because she heard that some of her people are trapped here, and that helping her might seem like going against the Swordmaster. Yojiri says he's already made a mess of his tower, so he won't be fond of him anyway, so he has no problem helping her. Then he asks her if she has any clues about where her people are, and she says she can feel their presence, and they seem to be somewhere underground. At that very moment, Rick and Federica and Lionel also enter the arena, and it turns out Rick and Federica were helping Lionel get some points too because he's a fucking loser. After that, they all reach the basement floor where Yurob announces that they've all passed the test and are now King Knights. At that very moment, the tower's maintenance staff enter and tell them that the first barrier around the Dark King has been nullified and for some reason the tower no longer works. This shocks Yuri and he wonders what happened. But then someone suddenly destroys the entire tower above them with an explosion and reveals himself as a high-class demon accompanied by another one of his kind. It seems their goal is to revive the Dark King, and they prepare to fight Yurob and his knights. The demon seems to possess the ability to turn off humans around him, while the other seems very skilled in magic because he blocks Federica's fire magic with his bare hands, then turns her staff along with her arm into a biscuit and gives it a taste, saying it's very sweet. Frederica wonders if she'll now become a red-haired Empress of the Sea, but quickly remembers she's just a side character for this side arc. Seeing all this, Lionel decides to use his remaining limited edition gacha roll and uses all his apology stones to summon some kind of miracle that would help them deal with the demons, but he ends up summoning the from before, causing great terror. He asks her if she'll disappear again, but she says this time she'll grant his wish to take care of everything, then advances toward the demons, and to everyone's amazement, both bow before her and reveal that she's actually the Dark King's wife. She's been summoning heroes and manipulating them to release her husband from the seal, but always failed because of the Swordmaster. But thanks to this unlucky piece of trash called Lyle, she managed to remove the barriers this time. Lionel asks her if she was lying about taking care of everything and granting his wish, and she says she didn't lie, and that she'll take care of them all by destroying all humanity, and thus leaving nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Yojiri and Tomasha and Theoda decide to go underground to find her people, and thanks to Yojiri's powers, they manage to kill the space-time barrier hiding the basement floor. Tomasha also notices some high-speed robots rushing in front of them with some blades, but they decide to ignore that and focus on the underground room in front of them. Once they enter, they find the room full of liquid chambers with Ada's people being used as guinea pigs for horrific experiments, and using their magic to support the barrier around the Dark King. Thea decides to end their misery using her hands, then vows to take revenge on the Swordmaster. However, they all return to see what was happening. On the other hand, we see Lionel trying to stall to create an opportunity for the Swordmaster to kill her. While doing this, he makes the reveal that she had been waiting for all kinds of obstacles to get out of her way, including the AAA Tower creator, because he would have been able to restore the barrier immediately. Additionally, she was also worried about the Slayer who suddenly died during the test, and now she is able to break the barrier to free her husband. However, she destroys the core of the barrier and releases the King and the Dark King from their time seal. But to everyone's surprise, the Dark King simply falls into the river with his dead ass and drowns away. They all wonder how this could have happened while we discover that this is what Yugiri does, and that he accidentally killed the Dark King in response to a high intensity of miasma in the area that was about to harm him. At that exact moment, Ada takes advantage of all the confusion and cuts the Swordmaster in half and gets revenge. This makes Rick and the others truly stunned and wonder if she is an enemy. At the same time, the high-speed robotic attacker Hedgehog also appears in the battle area and assassinates the and escapes. The two demons who started all this heal her to full health and rally their forces to attack the humans to avenge their king's death, but Yugiri simply wipes them all out with his ability and tells them he doesn't want any drama. This whole thing makes them lose her mind and start shooting random abilities in all directions. Tamasha asks Yugiri if he will do anything about her, but he says that hasn't done anything to him, so he has no reason to fight her. On the other hand, we see AI dragging Damon toward the tower while dodging all the random attacks using her ridiculous ability. Once she gets there, she uses her appraisal skill to tell Rick that he can take down the using his sword, which he does. Then he turns toward Yugiri and Tamasha to see what they're up to before fighting them. She uses her eye on Yugiri to check his stats, but it shows her the end of everything in him, and this makes her soul sweat as she decides to eat her ass out of there before handing Damon over to Yugiri. Yugiri wonders what she was up to, but turns to Damon and asks him how he managed to get out of his collar. He says he never said that his effect. Rick kept apologizing for deceiving them, and then he told them about Theodosia and what she did, and Yugiri asked him to see what they found in the vault, and if he decided to fight them, he would help Adi. Rick asks him what he can do with his little stick, but the king stops him and tells him that Yugiri is the one who took down the Dark King and all the demons around them, which makes Rick truly stunned as he apologizes for his rude behavior. And then they all decide to part ways. Rick, Federica, Lionel, and the king go to the royal capital, while Yugiri and Tamachi decide to go there on their own as well. Thea reveals her little sister's name, which turns out to be Euphemia, and Yugiri and Tamachi tell her that they heard this name while walking through one of the towns on their way, and tell her about the routes they took before leaving. Rick also gives them 2 necklaces with the royal emblem, and says they should show these ornaments to the guards in the capital if they need any help from him. With this, Yugiri and Tacha begin their journey toward the capital while leaving Damon to rely on his intelligence. But unfortunately, he ends up approaching one of the demons who attacked the tower and tells him to follow him. While all this is happening, we see she sipping some sweet tea while her knight gives her reports about Al and Yugiri, and she says she shouldn't interfere with sage candidates and decides to summon someone from Yugiri's world to ask them about him. It turns out the summoned man is one of the Japanese scientists who were monitoring him, and when he discovers that she is the one who made Alpha Omega disappear from their world, he calls her a savior and thanks her. But then he notices a warning on his device, saying he is a lower-level employee and is not allowed to approach Alpha Omega, and ends up self-destructing into a point of soft pizza in front of the sage. On the other side of the map, back at the place where the bus was attacked by the dragon, we see Ayaka suddenly regaining consciousness as she is brought back to life by some form of sentient ChatGPT, and the AI tells her she needs to get a large amount of nutrition to begin her recovery, or she will die within 30 minutes. Ayaka decides to eat some delicious rotten dragon, and let's talk more about that in the comments. Meanwhile, Yugiri and Tacha arrive at the royal capital and are stopped by the royal knights who ask them to get out of their car and show their identities. They explain that they got the car from the mayor of Hanabusa City and that they are sage candidates here for the trial. The guard inspects them using an appraisal tool, but Yugiri shows them the necklace Rick gave him, which makes them all kneel. They explain that it is the mark of the royal family and gives them clearance to enter the city. At this moment, the youngest prince, David, arrives and demands they show their swords as knights of the king, and Tamachi ends up accepting his challenge in a duel. When they fail to show him any swords, she displays her family's martial arts and ends up freeing David's future generations from the pain of childbirth, landing a blow to his precious eggs. David turns into a gentleman as he offers to give them a tour of the city and explains how the city walls were created thousands of years ago by the great sage Aga, the same man who created that tower, and he also tells them that the royal capital is built on an underground barrier that seals a dark lord like the Swordmaster's Tower, which surprises Yugiri and Tacha, as they didn't expect there to be more than one Dark Lord. Then Yugiri asks Tamachi whether they should forgive their classmates or should they take revenge on them, and Tamachi decides to first meet them and see what kind of stance they will take with them. However, they join their classmates at the royal palace, where they all meet the king. The 3 perverted ones from the class, now known as the 3 perverted Beta Lords, decide to assert their dominance by revealing that one of them has the ability to stop time while approaching the king and acting rudely toward him, but the king cuts off his fingers and reveals that their powers are greatly weakened if they try to fight anyone associated with the royal family and that they have been given the protection of the sages. Then he sits on his throne and says that to become sages, they must achieve a great feat within 1 month or they will all fail. Then the king walks away. Tachik and Yuri officially announce their presence. They all talk and Yugiri and Tacha finally agree to join them without any violence. They make up a cover story that Yugiri got an instant bug-killing skill, and Tacha got a special shield creation skill that only works on her. And thanks to these skills, they managed to escape from the dragon, The class leader says he still thinks they did the right thing by leaving them behind as bait, since the survival of many was the priority. With all that out of the way, they all start wondering about ways to pass the Sage test, and eventually end up getting help from the royal family, who suggests they go down to the underground dungeon and defeat the Dark Lord as an achievement for them. With this, they all form groups and go underground, led by David and Rick, who eventually arrive at the royal capital with the king as well. While Tamachi is busy moving her ass in the underground dungeon, Yugiri joins the group of losers in their class, including 2 other men, one who has the ability to cook and the other who has the ability to read anything. Soon, another man named Seihi joins them, who has the ability called Lord of Death, which is very similar to Yugi's ability to instantly kill his target, but is a lower version of Yugi's power. The man sits in front of Yugiri and reveals that he is with the cult, which is another organization that hails him as the Lord of Death, and he is also the one who refers to him as Lord Akashi. The men say he was watching him using his mechanical eye, but it stopped working since they came to this world. Then he walks away, saying he'll be happy to serve him if he needs his help. Then the other 2 spies also call Yugiri and Tomasha, and apologize to him for deceiving him all this time. Yugiri says he doesn't mind as long as they don't cause him any problems, and allows them to focus on their survival in this new world, and says he wants to meet the Sage Shion, because she might know a way to return to their world. While all this is happening, we discover that Euphemia managed to meet Leon's new body and decides to serve her. The new body calls herself Relai, and takes Euphemia with her on a journey to search for the man named Yugiri. Besides that, Shion goes to Sai in the Sage world, and discovers that she is suffering from PTSD after looking at Yugiri. She becomes worried and says she needs to get more information about what he actually is, and decides to go meet his classmates. At the same time, the Demon Generation cooperates with Damon because he knows about Yuri, and takes him to the royal capital to unseal the younger and stronger sister of the late Dark King, who resides under the royal capital. Once they enter the city, they go to a tavern and try to get information about ways to enter the underground dungeon, but then they see the 3 perverted fools there, and Damon says he must avoid being found by them, or it will be annoying for him. Suddenly, AKA suddenly flies into the tavern and starts beating one of the idiots until he turns into tomato sauce, and tells the others to go back and tell everyone that she won't forgive them, and that she will take revenge on them in front of them for leaving her behind as bait. Seeing all this makes Damon really worried too. But suddenly Kian appears before them, and asks Damon about Yugiri. He says he doesn't know much about him, but he gets information from her about the secret dungeon entrance. Shion says it will be fun to watch what they will do. Then she returns to her Sage world. There at night, while talking to her maid, she gets an unexpected guest who turns out to be Harold the analyst from the Sage candidates. Shion tells him that he found his way to her room using his problem-solving skills. Then he asks her to extend the deadline for their exam. Shion says she will think about it in exchange for him taking care of Yugiri, so he smiles and agrees. After that, Harold returns and hires an assassin with Sage and spirit powers, and asks him to kill Yugiri. Meanwhile, the other Sage candidates become worried for their lives because they fear Akka might come after them. One of these candidates, named Ryona, who has the ability to enhance her power, finds Akka and tries to snipe her with high-speed rocks, but Akka deflects it like it's nothing and engages in combat with her. She completely destroys her and her spirit, but Ryona says she's not at full strength because of that stupid suppression ability the king put in place that's active throughout the royal capital. Upon hearing this, Akka lets Ryona go to recover, and then flies off to burn the king's royal palace to ashes. After taking care of that, she comes back to fight Ryona at full strength, and proceeds to destroy her all over again. And the next night, she fights the loser chef, who somehow manages to give her a real fight by deriving his power by treating her as an ingredient, then uses his chef status to fight her with a kitchen knife and shadow clone technique, saying it's a basic skill for chefs because they often need many hands to keep the kitchen running. But even after all this, Akka ends up turning him into grilled barbecue using her dragon fire. Meanwhile, we discover that the reader guy actually has the ability to see the future that writes itself in his notebook once he makes a choice. While all this is happening, Damon and Lute descend into the secret dungeon, and discover that the Dark Lord's sister managed to break the seal on her own but decided to stay there to avoid angering her brother. She has a severe brother complex, and loves him so much that it makes her nice to Lute and Damon too when they bring her brother's key to her. But when Lute tells her that her brother is dead and who did it, it makes her really angry, and she takes his arms and says she'll revive her brother and starts swallowing everything around her using her magic. On the other hand, we see Shen arrive at the dining hall to meet the Sage candidates. After Herod got an extension from her, she tells everyone that she's not happy with how the Sage exam is turning out and thinks it's way too easy, so she wants them all to fight each other until only one remains, and that person will be the only one to become the Sage. This marks the beginning of the royal battle, where the guy with the Death Lord ability tries to use it on her, but she says it doesn't work on her because she heals herself completely by leveling up and then knocks him out with a flick of her finger. Meanwhile, Yugiri is relaxing outside and notices David sleepwalking, as if under some kind of spell, and watches him jump into a ravine, He tries to help him and ends up falling with him underground. The Dark Lord's sister, named Mana, transforms into her liquid form Mana and starts taking control of everything in sight as she begins flowing from the royal capital with extreme force. While falling, Yugiri saves himself and David by killing their momentum using his ability, and then meets Damon, who's also running for his life from Mana. They all end up catching an elevator that takes them up, and once they get there, Yugiri goes to meet Tomosha to find out what was happening. She tells him about the royal battle, and they end up fighting a group of their classmates too. Meanwhile, Akka decides today is a great day for revenge and joins the royal battle as well. She ends up fighting a girl who has the ability to summon all kinds of modern weapons, and when she starts losing the battle, she summons a nuke like a loser and throws it at Akka. The explosion destroys everything around it and catches Yugiri and the others in its effect too, but Yugiri saves them all by killing the laws of physics. Why not? Akka manages to survive the explosion by abandoning her human form and permanently transforms into her dragon form. Once she heals, she decides to make sure everyone is dead and finds Yugiri and the others alive in the middle of a burning area. Her mind control center chip starts talking, and it turns out it's a technology from the future, specifically developed to counter the instant death of Yugiri's ability by not being detected by him. This effect works to some extent, but Yugiri simply kills Akka too when he sees the massive dragon approaching them. After that, Shen appears before them and says she wanted to talk to Yugiri because she heard he would erase her. At this very moment, Yugiri uses his ability to kill one of her ankles, and then starts killing her fingers and shows her who's really the boss there. He then asks her to tell him ways to return to their old world, but she simply teleports instantly to her sage world and tries to heal herself. All her attempts fail, and this makes her worried. But then Yugiri starts killing more of her parts, and even starts attacking her beloved maid Day. This makes her give up and return to him, and explain that there's no way for them to return because the link between their worlds has already disappeared. After hearing this, Yugiri asks her to tell him the coordinates of their old world, and also asks her for ways to gather the necessary mana. She pulls the Philosopher's Stone from her chest, and says it's the source of immortality for sages, and should be enough to power their journey if they collect enough of them. All sages have these stones, but the stone loses its power if the sage dies. After hearing this, Yugiri decides to let her go, and returns to the royal palace with Tomosha, Damon, and the spies including Prince David. Once they leave, Mana materializes before Shen, and captures her using her power and absorbs her into herself while calling her a pathetic loser. Shen tells her to remember the name of the person who will kill her, while pointing at Yugiri before sinking into her. On the other hand, Yugiri and the others enter the castle and find the Archbishop babbling something about starting his law and era and being happy about Mana's awakening, but Yugiri silences him with his ability because he's too annoying. At this very moment, Mana materializes before them and says she'll destroy them too, but Yugiri silences her as well and ends the final boss battle in a second. With the kingdom now saved, David flies out of the castle on a ship with the spies, while Yugiri follows from behind by clinging to Tomosha, who glides down like Batwoman. Once outside, they notice that Damon has escaped again, and Yugiri says it's fine because he didn't like seeing his face anyway. After that, he says he'll now go search for the other Philosopher's Stones, so he and Tomosha can return to their world, and says he'll part ways with the rest. The two spies agree to go their own ways too, and decide to go with David. At the same time, a few aggressors land in the capital to see Mana's destruction and find Herod injured in the chaos. They decide to take him with them and fly away. While all this happened in the royal capital, we see a bit of Theoda, who ended up reuniting with her sister while rescuing some of her people from slave traders. There, she joins her sister and Risley and starts heading toward the royal capital because the little pink-haired girl wants to meet Yugiri. They arrive just in time to see Yugiri and Tomosha, deciding to head out and search for the other Philosopher's Stones. And upon seeing them, Risley jumps and hugs Yugiri and says she wants him to marry her while offering him her Philosopher's Stone. Yugiri wonders what all this was about, and Theoda fills him in on how Risley is obsessed with him because she learned about him from her older self after awakening. With that, they all board Risley's carriage and depart toward their next destination, while Yugiri decides to take a nap. And meanwhile, we see the queen watching the capital from a tower, wondering how someone could defeat Mana so easily, and decides it's too dangerous to let someone like Yugiri roam the world like this and starts tracking him, and thus ends the first season.